The Seattle Mariners haven't had a lot of success throughout their history, so after last season, their fans were understandably hyped. Their debut season was in 1977, but it wouldn't be until 1995, when Seattle was faced with potentially losing the Mariners, that they would make the playoffs for the first time. They'd go on to make the playoffs again in 1997, 2000, and 2001. Before starting the longest postseason drought in major American sports. The Mariners would miss the playoffs for 20 seasons in a row until last year, when on September 30th, Cal Raleigh hit a pinch hit, walk-off home run in a 2-1 win over the Oakland A's to break the drought. Finishing with a 90-72 record, Seattle would take on the Toronto Blue Jays in the wild card round and sweep the series in 2 games. Then they would get swept themselves in the division series by the Astros in 3 close games that came down to a Yordan Alvarez walk-off homer in the first game and a Jeremy Pena homer in the 18th inning of Game 3. While this series was a heartbreaker for Mariners fans, they could also feel hope for the first time in a long time that Seattle was not only on the right path, but was ready to start competing with the top teams in MLB again. With expectations higher than they've been in a long time, they'd get off to a slow start to 2023, making a lot of us just question again how good this team actually was. Well, that was until the Mariners caught absolute fire and have been one of the best teams in baseball over the last month or so. So let's break down what the Mariners did this offseason to try to add on to this contender, their slow start to the season, and how they managed to turn things around. And as we get into that, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more baseball content like this, and to make sure you don't miss out on any new videos. Following the 2022 season, the Mariners knew they still had a couple holes to fill on the roster, mainly at one of the corner outfield spots and at second base. Instead of signing some of the major free agents this offseason, GM Jerry Dipoto went back to the trade market, where he's been a major player during his time in Seattle, and started the Mariners offseason by calling up the Blue Jays. See, Toronto needed bullpen help, which the Mariners had plenty of in 2022. I'm going to touch on this a little bit more later. So Seattle was willing to part with reliever Eric Swanson and pitching prospect Adam Mako to bring in slugging outfielder Teoscar Hernandez, who had one final year of team control, and the Blue Jays were willing to move on from because they were trying to revamp their outfield to get more defensive-minded guys. So with the corner outfield spot addressed, next the Mariners needed to fill second base, and Dipoto again would make a call to get a trade done, this time with Milwaukee. The Brewers had veteran second baseman Colton Wong, a 2-time Gold Glover on the last year of his deal, who they would send over to clear room in their infield for more of their younger players to start taking over, and they would get outfielder Jesse Winker coming off of the worst year of his career in his single season in Seattle, because that's never happened before here, and infielder Abraham Toro, who hadn't found his footing in the majors quite yet. With these 2 trades, the Mariners seemed to fill their big needs in the lineup, and they would go out to sign outfielder AJ Pollock and infielder Tommy La Stella to round out the bench. But the other moves that they made were classic Jerry Dipoto, and it's why, like I mentioned earlier, the Mariners bullpen has been such a strength for them. What Dipoto might do better than any other GM in baseball is find pitchers that other teams are giving up on and turn them into bona fide bullpen pieces. And this offseason, he made a separate trade with the Brewers to get Justin Topa, and he claimed both Gabe Spire and Taylor Cicero off of waivers. Being able to find this kind of pitching depth has been huge here, because not only building yourself an absolute weapon of a bullpen that you can then flip some of these guys to fill other needs on the team, but also, unfortunately, injuries are always part of the game. And after a relatively healthy 2022 for the Mariners, the injuries would start this season in only the second game. Making his first start of the season, the 2021 AL Cy Young winner Robbie Ray would only make it through 3 1/3 innings before having to leave the game, later finding out that he needed season-ending Tommy John surgery. Then 6 days later, on April 7th, the Mariners would also lose one of their top relievers, Andres Munoz, to a strained shoulder. So early on, their depth was going to get tested here, with Chris Flexen having to move from the bullpen to the rotation, and Gabe Spire, Justin Topa, and Taylor Cicero all getting their shots in the bullpen, with a lot of moving parts here over the first couple of weeks. Now, so far this season, Topa has thrown 52 1/3 innings in 58 games, games with a 2.06 ERA and a 2.79 FIP, absolutely refusing to let hitters take him deep. Spire in 55 games has gone 44 1/3 innings with a 3.25 ERA and a 2.73 FIP, being really tough to hit while walking batters less than half of MLB average. And Saucedo has gone 39 innings in 41 games with a 3.23 ERA and a 3.27 FIP, another guy that's just refused to give up bombs. Now, while we saw a couple moving parts due to injuries, we also saw some players getting called up because some of the Mariners' offseason additions really struggled here. As a part of this shuffling in April, the Mariners brought up infielder Jose Caballero, a 26-year-old rookie who's been the Mariners' 5th best position player by FWAR, flashing on-base ability, a solid glove in the middle of the infield, and is an absolute menace on the base paths, just demanding the pitcher's attention and swiping 25 bags. Caballero had managed to find a spot on the roster, and with Chris Flexen struggling in the rotation and Tommy La Stella struggling enough that he got DFA'd on May 2nd, this cleared the room for the Mariners to bring up prospect Bryce Miller to make his debut in the rotation. Miller's had a pretty successful rookie campaign so far, in 19 starts going 101 2/3 innings with a 3.9 ERA and a 3.77 FIP, a plus fastball that he goes right at hitters with to keep the walks down. Now, the Mariners weren't too worried about having to rely on a rookie here in the rotation, because their top 3 starters are right up there with the best trios in baseball. You have Luis Castillo, who Seattle traded for at last year's deadline, making his 3rd All-Star team this year, going 157 1/3 innings in 26 starts with a 3.15 ERA and a 3.72 FIP. Very tough to hit, but when he has gotten hit this year, he's given up a handful of home runs. Then you have George Kirby, the Mariners' 1st-round pick in 2019, in only his 2nd season made his 1st All-Star team, going 156 1/3 innings in 25 starts with a 3.28 ERA and a 3.21 FIP. And I genuinely believe that this man is allergic to walking hitters. And finally, there's Logan Gilbert, Seattle's 1st-round pick the year before in 2018. In his 25 starts, he's gone 148 innings with a 3.77 ERA and a 3.73 FIP, and just another guy with good stuff that just lights up the strike zone. With these guys at the front of the rotation, they could deal with the injuries to some of these other starters this year, both with Robbie Ray and then when Marco Gonzalez would wind up on the IL too with a nerve issue in his forearm, because then this opened up another spot for a Mariners prospect, this time Brian Wu, to make his debut on June 3rd. And Wu has also managed to hang in there as a rookie, putting up better numbers than his 4.58 ERA might suggest in his 12 starts. Even with injuries taking out 2 of their starters and a couple rookies filling in, the rotation has been this team's biggest strength and what's constantly kept them in ball games all year. While pitching the 3rd most innings of any rotation in baseball, they've been 6th in ERA, 3rd in FIP and FWAR, and 4th in SIERA. Arguably a top 5 rotation in all of MLB. They've given up the fewest base runners of any rotation because the game plan here is simple. The Mariners get starters who are gonna light up the strike zone. They're not gonna walk anybody, they're gonna make hitters beat them rather than hurting themselves with free base runners. The Mariners would get Andres Munoz back on June 6th, and in his 38 games, he's gone 36 2/3 innings with a 2.70 ERA and a 2.45 FIP. An absolute fireballer who just racks up Ks and has barely given up any homers either. His return would finally get the bullpen back to full strength, but on June 11th, Seattle would find themselves at 31 33. 10 games back in the division. After another month of 500 ball, frustrations were starting to boil over here, and on July 19th, former top prospect and the centerpiece of the Edwin Diaz-Robinson Cano trade, outfielder Jared Kelenic would fracture his foot, kicking a water cooler after striking out. Kelenic was finally looking like he'd started to figure out major league pitching, in 90 games slashing .252, .320, .439, with 11 home runs and a .110 WRC+, while still striking out quite a bit. But with him going down, rookie Cade Marlowe would be brought up in his place, and Marlowe's done a pretty good job so far. Now, last season, the Mariners started a hot streak that propelled them into playoff contention after a fight with the Angels broke out when Julio Rodriguez and Jesse Winker were both hit in the same inning. So Kelenich's outbursts like this could have been a similar kind of spark to kind of get them going. This wouldn't be the case though. The Mariners would go into the August 1st trade deadline at 55-51, still 5 games back in the division, and they'd end up making a trade that made it seem like they weren't all in on competing this year. Seattle traded their 33-year-old closer Paul Sewald, who was set to be a free agent after next season, to the Arizona Diamondbacks, getting back second baseman Josh Rojas, outfielder first baseman Dominic Canzone, and infield prospect Ryan Bliss. Sewald had been outstanding with Seattle, but like we talked about earlier, Dipoto has continued to find valuable bullpen pieces seemingly out of nowhere. In fact, he'd signed Sewald as a minor league free agent in January of 2021 after the Mets released him. So the Mariners had excess in the bullpen that they could use to address some of their other needs. The bullpen this year has been 3rd in ERA, 2nd in FIP and FWAR, and 1st in SIERA. Arguably one of, if not the best bullpens in baseball. So how does Dipoto build a bullpen this strong with a bunch of guys that other teams are giving up on? Well, his type is pretty obvious here. It's guys that have a good fastball that they can pair with an absolutely wicked slider. And they spam this combo like that annoying friend that you're never gonna play Smash Bros with again. And with the way that they attack hitters, they might give up a base hit here or there, but that's if they don't strike you out. And a ground ball single is about all that you can hope for, because you're not going to square them up and you're not going to take them deep. To clear room on the roster after this trade, the Mariners would finally part ways with Colton Wong, who only managed to hit 165, 241, 227 with 2 home runs and a 35 WRC plus in 67 games. But then after looking like they were more focused on next season, the beginning of August here is where the Mariners would become a completely different team. They would kick off 2 separate 8-game winning streaks from the 2nd to the 11th and from the 15th to the 22nd. And now here through the 25th, they sit at 72-56. Tied for first place in the AL West and the 2nd wildcard spot with the Texas Rangers. And Seattle has even had to deal with some injuries here in August, with Brian Wu missing some time due to forearm inflammation, which opened up a spot for their 3rd pitching prospect, Emerson Hancock, to make his debut in the rotation. You know, before he would wind up on the 60-day IL with a strained shoulder, and Brian Wu would just go back into his spot in the rotation. And in the lineup too, the Mariners' most consistent hitter all season, shortstop J.P. Crawford, who's hit 265, 382, 413 with 11 home runs and a 129 WRC plus in 111 games, taking great at-bats and drawing a ton of walks. He missed some time with a concussion after colliding with 3rd baseman Eugenio Suarez when they were both going for a ground ball. But even with him out, this is where the lineup has come alive. Last year's American League Rookie of the Year, Julio Rodriguez, would set a new major league record with 17 hits in 4 games. 4! And his bat heating up is a great example of what's happened to this lineup as a whole. So let's talk about the Mariners lineup through August 1st, and then during this hot streak from August 2nd to the 25th, where they went from top 10 in home runs and runs scored to top 5. Their slash line went from about average across the board to top 3, and they went from 5th in WRC plus and FWAR to the best in baseball. This kind of improvement is ridiculous, but this is where we have to talk about what kind of hitters are in the Mariners lineup, because it can help explain how these guys have made such a huge jump when they got hot here. First, their lineup is gonna take their walks, and that's gonna give you some base runners pretty consistently, which you need to score runs. But the Mariners struggled at times to move guys around and to get them home, because a lot of these guys are swing and miss hitters that are gonna strike out a lot. They're not gonna give you too many productive outs, but when they hit the ball, they can hit. For swing and miss hitters like this, if you aren't putting the ball in play very often, you have to make the most of the times that you do. And when Seattle's hitters make contact, again, when being the key word here, they're one of the best lineups at barreling the ball up, hitting it really hard as a line drive or a lower fly ball, where you have a pretty good chance at getting anything from an almost sure hit to a chance for extra bases. So when you're not getting good results on these balls that you're putting into play, especially the ones that you're barreling up, this offense can be really cold. But during this run that the Mariners have been on, they've managed to cut down on their strikeouts and give themselves more chances on balls in play. And a bit of luck has gone their way too, with the highest average on balls in play in MLB. So take a look here at the splits for Julio Rodriguez, Teoscar Hernandez, Cal Raleigh, and Eugenio Suarez. All high strikeout, swing and miss kind of guys. Since they don't put the ball in play as much as a hitter that strikes out less, they make their mark on a game with big hits in big moments. Not with productive outs or a well-placed single that's gonna move base runners around. These kind of hitters are gonna have their slumps like earlier this year, but when they get hot like this, they're crushing almost anything that you throw at them. Now, not much has really changed for the lineup here as a whole, just you need the middle of your order guys to be producing runs. Just like I said, these types of hitters are gonna go through their stretches where they're really hot and where they're really cold. But with the pitching that the Mariners have, it looks like their floor has been about 500 baseball. And now in prime position to make the playoffs again and to try to make a deeper postseason run than last year, Seattle's gonna need the lineup to stay hot like this, or at least to be hot at the right time. So let me know if you think they can do that. Can they make another run at a playoff spot? And any other thoughts that you have about any of this, comment all your thoughts down below. And if you enjoyed the video, again, I'd really appreciate if you'd like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps out the channel, and more importantly, you get to see more baseball content like this every time we drop a new video. You can also help support the channel by checking out our merch store, link is down in the description, or by checking out our most recent video about what's led to the Yankees' disaster of a season that's on your screen now. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have an awesome day. Later.